Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, before I start, let's put our hands together to welcome our distinguished panelists to spend the afternoon with us, and also our hardworking events team in PropertyGuru for helping us to put it together. Okay, so the topic for today is the impact post-general election. What is the impact on the Malaysian property market? So it's a very interesting topic and also very exciting one, because we have seen a change in government in Malaysia. That has never happened before. It's the first time in the history of Malaysia for a ruling party that has ruled the country since independence to change government. And it's also a very democratic change which is totally bloodless. So what many overseas investors like us in Singapore want to know is what is the impact of this change of government to the real estate market in Singapore. So without much further ado, I would like to invite Mr. Siva Shanker, being the head of investment in industrial REIT in Malaysia. He looks at real estate investment, for him to shed some light on us about this new government, maybe some thinking and policy behind the new government, so that we Singaporeans are more familiar with what the top brass are thinking. And I'll pass the mic to Siva. Thanks, Siva.
Thank you, Winston. So I shared some of this, some of my insights. I shared it already at the talk that I had just now. But I think what's really happening on the ground is 30 million Malaysians are waiting for a few Malaysians to go to jail. And when that happens, 30 million Malaysians will be happier. The new government is actually cleaning house. Every day they uncover some new worms. Every time we think that this is it, nothing more will come, the next morning something new turns up. So it's very scary. It's very scary to see the financial mess that the country is in. But I think the good thing is that the new government is cleaning house, putting in place some very good fiscal policies, trying the very best to renegotiate contracts and sometimes terminate contracts that are deemed unfavorable to the country. And I think what they're doing more than anything else is that they are trying to reduce their spending. Of course, there are all sorts of smart alecks anywhere you go in the world, and in the last 3 months now there's many complaints that they are moving too slowly and they are not doing enough. But you see, these armchair experts are really that, just armchair experts. You'll be surprised that the most unsuccessful people are the ones who think that they know the most. And it's very strange. I always say that if really you know so much, why aren't you the Prime Minister? Or why aren't you the chief economist of the country, you know? So we have to, just forget about these stupid armchair critics. To me, I think they have done remarkably well in the last 3 months. It's amazing the amount of horrible things that they've uncovered, and I'm sure that they will continue to uncover these things. So I think Malaysia is on a positive growth trajectory, but it's going to take 5 to 10 years. 60 years of mess cannot be undone in 3 months. So yeah.
So maybe I want to follow up further with Siva. We understand that when we watch the Channel News Asia and also read the papers, there was a very strong jubilant mood after the election day. And it seems that many Malaysians, including our own Malaysian friends, were celebrating like there's no tomorrow. So has that jubilance translated into more enquiries, more viewings, or more transactions in the real estate sector? Or has that jubilance translated into improved retail sentiment, more people go out on the street to buy things, So what is the kind of impact on the real economy and the real estate market?
Okay, that jubilance has translated into retail sales for sure. The retailers have already reported positive more sales. I think that's simply because the feel-good factor makes you want to go out and just spend some money and celebrate. That euphoria has died down a little bit now. We're more calm. But one of my jobs is to engage with estate agents continuously. So I speak to tens and hundreds of estate agents regularly. And I can tell you this, everybody says almost the same thing to me. The number of inquiries has increased, the interest in properties has increased, the number of viewings have increased. Have these things translated directly into higher sales? Not yet, because property investment has a bit of a gestation period. But definitely it will in the next few months. Definitely it will.
Okay, thank you. I would like to ask Mr. Zuhaidi, being the partner of a law firm. So one of the interesting things that we noticed with the change of government is that we have a new government prime minister saying that you can't buy property in certain parts of this project in Johor. I don't want to mention name, and then you foreigners cannot buy. So I just want to have a sense of the real situation, especially from yourself, from a law firm. What are actually the laws in Malaysia that govern the interests of the investors, and what are the laws that are protecting the investor interests? So we want to understand a bit more about this news and also the real situation.
Thanks, Winston. Good question. First, we must differentiate between news and laws. Because as far as I know, the laws have not changed. Nothing has changed. Of course, there's a lot of news coming in back and forth. But remember, this guy is also, he's a 93-year-old guy. So you need to exercise a little bit of caution. But the laws has not changed. And yeah.
So in other words, what you're saying is that foreigners can still continue to buy properties even in that particular affected project?
Yes, and they can always continue to buy, but with understanding of the legal framework of ownership of property. There was one question by an audience just now. If I have, I'm a foreigner, I already own a property, I bought a property in Malaysia, is it protected? Should I be scared with all these new statements and anything like that? You should not, because property ownership is protected in Malaysia. Once you are registered as an owner, the government cannot take it away from you. But of course, there is land acquisition and everything else, where the government can compulsorily acquire the land from you. That's the only way. But that they can only do it for the purpose of public interest. For example, to do train station, to do schools, but not for commercial development. They can't do that.
So I think the other part of that news is talking about visa residency. So I think this is another hot topic among foreigners because of the vast, beautiful land that Malaysia has to offer. Many foreign investors buy property in Malaysia with the intention of staying there as a retirement home or for their children's education or for healthcare purpose. So maybe you can share with the audience what are the current Malaysian laws that govern foreigners seeking residency in Malaysia, permanent residency, citizenship, and what are the options that a foreigner really have available for him to do so, and how does that tie back with property investment?
Of course, on top of the list is citizenship. Right, but that's beyond question. And then you have permanent resident. That's also very difficult to get. You need to spend many years and a lot of other conditions. And then we have all other kind of visas. The one that I have mentioned is MM2H visas, a 10-year visa, which is fairly easy to get. You can. There's a lot of registered agents who do that. go and see them and understand what are the conditions, and it's quite fast actually, the approval. But when the Prime Minister issued statement that we are not going to give visa, it should be taken with a little bit of weight also. Because at the end of the day, you apply, you fulfill the condition, but it's the discretion of the authority, the Home Ministry, whether or not to approve that visa. So the conditions have not changed, but I do not know whether the appetite to approve has changed. That remains to be seen.
Okay, thank you. Next, I'll move on to our lady here, Edith. So Edith is KEO of local Singapore agency. Maybe I would like to ask Edith, since she has been selling property to Singaporean, has she seen any change in interest from Singaporeans around Malaysian property ever since after the Malaysian general election, and also specifically in Singapore case after the introduction of the 8th cooling measure, which is the additional 5% stamp duty and LTV ratio. So being her capacity as a KEO of a Singapore agency, maybe she can share some light on the Singapore sentiments on this.
Thanks, Winston. So I think for investment, whether or not I'm with an agency, I like always to look at from the investor's viewpoint. So I think a lot of currently all news about Malaysia, for a while I would say that even my own staff, who's actually a Malaysian working in Singapore, she's so excited about the general election that, she takes additional days of leave after the general election. So as someone who has seen cycles after cycles, I would say that the most important in your mind is that what do an investor look into? So sentiments-wise, I would say that there is generally a switch from residential properties to both commercial and also foreign properties. So if you ask me, on the ground, basically, these are what the investors are looking at. Why should I pay the additional buyer stamp duty? And with Malaysia being the nearest neighbor, and I think Singaporeans will all enjoy food, enjoy the kind of lifestyle there. And yes, second home ownership is somebody, basically a lot of us are looking at. So on the ground, we will actually be, in fact, there is a surge of inquiries. Say that, what should I buy? Should I buy commercial? Should I buy foreign properties? If foreign properties, where are the locations to buy? What are the restrictions? So I think these are things like such an exhibition. I'm sure here there are many Singaporeans here. You are here to find out before you dive into purchase.
So Edith, in your capacity as the KEO of a Singapore agency, when it comes to buying of a foreign property, what kind of advice do you normally give to the Singapore investors? What are some of the key considerations that they should make when buying the overseas property? Maybe you can share some light.
Okay, I like to divide this property decision into 3 easy steps. First of all, when you enter, what's the kind of cash, what kind of loan, aside of course, you have experts basically from tax, from law that you can check with regards to the restriction for foreign property ownership. But divide into 3 steps. First step is, what do you need to fulfill before you enter? So basically, in Malaysia, if you look at it, it's, you have to buy above 1 million. In some places, no need to. Okay, so that's one. So entry, how much cash you have to set aside? Okay, what kind of loan can you have? Then second step is basically during the interim, what kind of payment scheme that you have to follow up with. Third step is basically after that, am my property going to sit there waiting for me to find another a tenant? I think in Singapore, because we are all focusing on our work, so rental guarantee becomes something which you feel is easy to deal with. But as Singaporeans, sometimes we are skeptical. Is the rental income built into my purchase price? So if not, is say a 5% guaranteed yield, is it something that is a rental that comparable in the marketplace? Okay, and then last part, can I exit from this property? Is there a ready resale market? So I think with this, basically it's also very much aside from my work, it's also from my own investment, where basically you fulfill these 3 steps, and then the final step is also, is there somebody else who will buy from me? So I think then you are very safe, knowing what you are going ahead with.
Thank you, Edith. So I would like to go back to Siva. Okay, so back to Malaysia. So we do see a change of government. Maybe you can share with us what are some of the policies that the new government has implemented that you think has a certain effect or impact on certain segment of the real estate market, either on a state basis or on a certain ministry basis. What are some of the new so-called policies that you think we need to be mindful of as we want to venture into Malaysia?
Actually, they haven't made any. They haven't made any policy yet, really. Forget about the forest city one. That's politics and economics don't mix, and that was politics. So I think we wait a while for that to clear. I think that was more about forest city and China buyers, right? And if you were neither one of these two, as a foreign buyer to Malaysia, I think you have nothing to worry about. So as a Singaporean, I think you can come and buy any property in Malaysia that you wanted, as long as it was within the guidelines. And that's fairly simple. Every country has some sort of law that you have to follow, and Malaysia is no different. So if you are going to buy a property in Malaysia, I say to you, don't worry about government policy. It's not going to change and make things unfavorable for you. Even if it changes, it'll change a little bit. It won't be the end of the world. Yeah. As far as other policies that they've put in place, they haven't really. They haven't had time. But one or two things that has or will probably affect properties is the cancellation of the HSR, high-speed rail to Singapore. Yeah, postponement, right? Now, I was very strong, a very strong proponent of this one, and I said that the train will do good for Malaysia and Singapore, but the biggest factor would be pricing. Now, if you price the train ride at $400, then I won't take a train lah. I will go to Subang Airport and I will fly to Changi in the Firefly for 150 ringgit. And that's the end of it, But if you gave me a cheaper rate, or if I had a pass, a monthly pass that was very cheap, then I think what would happen is, just imagine this, you're a Singaporean but you live in Malaysia. You took the train to work and went back by train. So you had a big land and a nice house in the middle, and you can come out and sit in your garden and look at stars at night. It's amazing. You could also have Malaysians who worked in KL, but were willing to live in Batu Pahat because it's only an hour by train to their office and an hour back, So, and a lot of developers, I think, speculated by buying land around the suggested train stops. These guys would be affected in some way or the other because they will now have to land bank and wait and hope. Don't know when, whether 2 years or 5 years, we don't know. So that's one. The other thing that I think, and I disagree with my own government on this one, was the cancellation of the LRT3. But it's now since come back. but they've reduced the stations. I don't think it's a good idea to reduce stations. Yes, I understand that there's been a lot of corruption in the country and a lot of lopsided contracts. Many things are coming to light now. But perhaps, sitting here so easy to talk, we don't know the trouble they're having. So I suppose if you had speculated on one of those stations and that station got taken out, then perhaps you're looking at a transit-oriented development that has no transit. Yeah, so those would be some of the effects.
How about the cancellation of GST? Do you see that as a sustainable move by the new government, and does it affect the fiscal economy of Malaysia in the sense that the new government may not have enough funds to cover their expenditure?
Yeah. Well, I can't tell the truth because he's filming now, because afterwards he'll put it on YouTube and then I'll go to jail. But the real truth is, yeah, they collected 42 billion, they're going to collect 20 over billion now. So there's a 20 billion shortfall. Lim Guan Eng says he'll manage because he can correct 3 billion from there, 5 billion from there, 6 billion from there, and then, if you get rid of some of the corruption and whatever not, he says he more or less can make do. I believe he can. I think he's a smart guy. And given a bit of time, I believe he can. So it's good for the people because from so many items that are being taxed, now only, it's halved or something. So for the consumer, it's good. And I think in the long run, I was against the abolishment of GST. I believe that GST is a good thing. It's a broad-based tax. It taxes everybody equally, and it brings that much money to the government. And you can run your system. You can fire your engine. But I think without having, and I think Mahathir is not stupid, and he knows that the GST is a damn good thing also. But he had no choice. Politics trumps economics, and he had to promise the abolishment of that to win the election. So we're not politicians, so we don't understand lah.
Right. Means to an end.
Means to an end.
Okay, so my next question is for Asmi. Just now, Siva mentioned about postponement, which you rightfully mentioned, postponement of the high-speed rail between KL and Singapore. So I would like to hear your views about, now they are saying they postpone. So I would like to hear your views about what's going to happen when the day of reckoning comes. What do you think is the direction of the Malaysian government? Because again, from a legal point of view, both countries are binded by an agreement on this. So what are some of the thoughts that you have about this?
Well, obviously postponement means one party is trying to buy more time. And for 2 years, there's a lot of things that they can do. Of course, their main concern is cost, and it's a losing business. For example, the London-Paris train, it took them 20 years to break even. Obviously, even though they're going to charge, they're going to get 400, they're not going to make money. So I assume they have a strategy in 2 years, whether they can beef up the government coffers to recommence the project, or they're gonna just shove it away.
Allow me to...
sorry, I think there's a question from the floor. Maybe can someone pass this lady a mic? We can make this very interactive. Feel free to raise your hand and ask any question if you have any. You can pass the mic over to the lady over here. Yes, this lady in front.
Aziz, did I hear you say they may scrap the HSR? Or because the current status is that it's being delayed and they're just paying penalties for the delay?
They would have scrapped it now, but the penalty would be much higher. It would run in hundreds of millions. So they need time to figure out what they need to do. Again, based on the how threats the financial situation of the government. So it could go either way in 2 years. That's my personal assessment. Yeah.
I think if I were to read what Asmi is trying to tell us is that postponement means the Malaysian government is trying to buy time to beef up the coffers to develop HSR. So ideally, I think when he mentioned that, what it means is that they are hopefully able to raise some funds over the 2 years' time to continue the project. But of course, what he's saying is that worst case scenario, if they cannot achieve that, then it may be scrapped. But I think, as Siva mentioned, the current leaders of the cabinet are all very smart people. I think everyone wants to achieve win-win situation. So I think that is the premise that we are looking at.
I'll just add on to the Singapore aspect, like Jurong East, which is actually the starting point of the station. So I think some of the investors actually bought Vision Exchange, which is a commercial property in Singapore. So right now it's in limbo. Some of them will speculate that, right now is the best time to buy, or some of them will say that, hey, what if it doesn't build, for the HSR, yeah.
So to build on Edith's point, yesterday there was a panelist who mentioned this. Actually, this is actually a best opportunity for investors to buy, because when everything is confirmed, the developers and everyone will price in all the infrastructure. But because now it's postponement, they can't. So if you buy, you are buying actually on the basis there's no HSR. But eventually, if there is, then it becomes a bonus. Yeah. So, okay, now I would like to direct the question to Edith. So now, from a Singapore agency point of view, let's say now we are talking about Malaysia. Just now you mentioned Malaysia is a very nearby country. The Singaporeans can park some money there because of a high transaction cost in Singapore. So what kind of location or city you'll be looking at when you help the Singaporean investors to source for investment destination? Because just now I think you mentioned a couple of criteria, like you must have rental, and then it must be possible to exit, to sell to the next buyer. So what kind of location are you eyeballing now to fulfill those criteria that you mentioned?
Okay, I think we all attended just now Mr. Siva's, basically the 3 hot locations. I think, again, Johor, if you are looking at, Johor by nature, it doesn't have manufacturing site, basically we all know that. So I think ecosystem itself, okay, I'm not recruited by Sunway, but I thought that was actually a very good, ecosystem, because you need the population itself to bring in. KL, by nature, is always the financial center. It is always the epicenter for every country, for the city. If I were to ask you the same question, in Singapore, if you have all the money, where would you buy? You are likely to say basically the city itself, where possible. So I think not to, basically I would choose where KL city itself, Bukit Bintang, because I love the action there. Okay, and at the same time, I have actually surveyed around the booths here. You guys will notice that actually very few commercial title projects are brought in here. Why? Because the moment like shops and all that, you can only find them in KL. I mean, basically you have to go to the country to buy. And, commercial title also includes service apartments. So if I may do a little bit of advertisement, we actually saw this opportunity, a very exclusive block in KL itself. So I think after the session, you guys can come to me. It's a commercial titled service apartment. So that fulfills the rental affordability. Okay, again, Penang, I won't miss out, because I think Penang shop houses are always in vogue. If you can afford more money, you're not just buying for commercialization, you are buying a piece of heritage. And I think likely, if you look at Singapore, shop houses over time increases its value. So I think that's my take for the 3 locations, but you have to go microscopic. That means not any of the projects in KL, not any of the projects in Johor, and not any of the projects in Penang. So it requires you to actually work with someone who has a little bit of knowledge over there, or you have friends who have actually Malaysian counterparts. Of course, everything done arm's length. We have this 10 criteria because we believe that investment is something that you have to think through it very logically. Today, with political situation or no political situation, what are you buying it for? Yeah, so that's the question back to yourself.
Okay, so what we are hearing is that Johor, KL, Penang, we have some heritage shop house that is much cheaper than Singapore conservation shop house, KL, city center, Bukit Bintang, service apartment, good rentability, Johor, for Singaporean using as a weekend home. Okay, so maybe I'll back to Siva. Just now we have heard from a Singaporean KO perspective how she map out some of the potential destination that she's eyeballing for Singapore investor. How about yourself, being from in KL, and last time you were running this KL agency business. What do you think are some of the location or city that you yourself or you advise a foreign investor to pay attention to?
I always think this, you may be close by, Singapore may be close by. I advise clients from as far away as Europe and Australia, and you may think that you're close by, but you're still a distance away. Yeah. If you're going to invest in a country which is not your own country, then I think if you stick to the best locations, the premium locations, get a premium property in a premium location, then you would have less trouble with it. The kind of tenant you would attract would be a tenant that gives you less headache, doesn't really want to talk to you, and will just pay the rent on time, and you'll see him twice in your whole life. Once when he moves in, and once when he moves out. It's an ideal tenant, right? I know I said just now that the market's gone this way, and you have to invest in locations that are further away from the city, from the epicenter. But as a foreigner, as a person who is not a citizen of the country, I believe your money would work better for you in a prime location. So if you're talking about KL, I think very easily stay within the city center. There's a lot of condos around the KLCC location. Yeah, there is the Twin Towers there, and the 50-acre park, and all around it is many condos. You could buy any one of them. They are underpriced. They are still underpriced. It's amazing that a city center location at a major city like KL can sell for that cheap. It's absolutely silly. So buy one of those, you'd be okay. Go to Damansara. Don't be fooled by Damansara. Half of Selangor is called Damansara. So be very careful which Damansara you go to, right? When I say Damansara, I meant Damansara Heights, the old traditional Damansara Heights. Buy properties there. Bangsa, Damansara Heights, Petaling Jaya, some parts of Ampang, Yutan, Taman Duta, Kenny Hills. Those are good residential areas. If you're talking commercial, if you want to buy the shop lots or shop offices, you could go to SS2, Damansara Utama, Kelana Jaya, PJ. These are the locations. Yeah. So it depends on what you want. If you want to buy industrial, then go to Shah Alam and Port Klang, and so. But whatever it is you want to buy the primest you can afford in the primest location you can afford. Then you'll be safe.
Yes, like what you and Edith mentioned, Bukit Bintang, KLCC, all these prime location, just like the Orchard Road of Singapore. So another question to you, Siva, is that there are many Singapore investors who have this question. When buying residential, which is most Singaporeans familiar with, should I go for landed or should I go for condominium?
Oh, this question got no answer. Yeah, you see, it's like this. The simplest answer to this question is this. A condo, a high-rise residential property will probably give you 4.5%, 5% returns, 5% if you're lucky, yeah? 4.5 is more likely returns. A landed property would give you maybe 2.5%, 3 if you're very lucky. But a landed property will go up in capital value much more in any number of given years than a condo would escalate in capital value. So only you can answer the question, what is your investment strategy? Is your investment strategy capital appreciation and you don't care about yield? Then go for landed. If your investment strategy is yield intensive and you don't care about capital because you're more interested in cash flow, then go for the condo. So really, it's a very personal question, only answerable by you. And that's where I suppose people like me and all my other peers come into play, because you come and tell us what it is you want and then we structure a strategy for you. For example, the trust fund that I work for, which is a real estate investment trust, we really don't put much emphasis on what capital value is going to be in 20 years. We want the yield now, right now. So if I can buy a property and I can get the yield that I want, I'll buy it regardless of what will happen in 20 years. Because I'm more interested in what I can get every month for the next 20 years. So investment strategies are very different. Everybody has their own.
Thank you. Edith, you want to answer that question?
I think to add on, that's why I think for Property Bank we devised 10 must-have, like, time factor, for example, for Singaporeans. If you really don't have time to manage, then of course a condo is better than a landed. And better still if the condo or service apartment comes with property management. So I think, many years back, I actually worked for MBF. So, during those days, they used to collect back those developers who owe them money and cannot fund the project. They will come in as a funder. And many times when I was very young then, a rookie, when I was marketing, after the project is completed, like even those days, earlier days, Port Dickson and all those, some of the foreign investors will come and say, hey, nobody is taking care of the property. My aircon is no longer there anymore. So I think if it's a condo or service apartment, I think service apartment, of course, outweigh that because there is property management in place. Yeah.
Okay, so if you have someone who can do the property management, like a service apartment for you, that would be a plus point for time-stretched Singaporean. Okay, my next question is directed to Asmi. So since most of you here are foreign investors, maybe you can share with the audience what are some of the legal implication and tax implication foreign investors have to consider when they buy a property in Malaysia. What are the properties foreigners can buy, cannot buy, and then what are the tax that they have to be mindful of when they buy, when they hold, when they sell, for example?
Okay. The first one, I think you must know whether at the end of the day you can own the property. Yeah, read all the brochures and everything and get an expert advice whether you are entitled to buy, whether the state will approve. In most instances, it will. Because you talk about all the prime developers here, they're not here to screw you up. If they know they can't sell to foreigners, they won't sell. And secondly, know the cost. The cost, the entry cost is not only the acquisition cost, the purchase price. There are stamp duties, which could be huge. And then when you know those costs, you ask the developer whether there's any incentives to help you to absorb this cost. That's entry cost. Then holding cost, like I mentioned, what kind of tax that you need to bear. In Malaysia, there's no property tax. What you have is what we call assessments, where you pay 2 times each year to the local council based on the certain percentage of the annual value of your property. So try to find out what you need to pay every year. Then if another tax is quit rent that you pay to the land office. This is a small amount normally, so it's negligible. And then your exit, does it come with cost? It does. Capital gains tax. Real property gains tax. You must know what is the rate now, and then you are well informed in making your investment decision.
So the current real capital gain tax is, if a foreigner sells within 5 years, it's 30%, right? And then after 5 years, it's 5%, right?
Exactly.
So other than that, is there any other things the foreign investor need to be mindful of? For example, state consent, because foreign investor need to do state consent. So what is your advice normally for foreign investor? Let's say they buy a property, do they just sign everything first and then hopefully state consent approved, or they should wait until state consent approved? What was your advice for the foreign investor?
If you're buying new projects from developers, the developers will help you all the way in getting this consent, because as a general rule of thumb, they cannot take money if they cannot sell to you. So there's like they can use stakeholders, and they can give you undertaking to refund if they need. But like I said, if they have decided to sell to a global market, they know that they have already obtained the quota, they have obtained a blanket approval, for instance. It's just a matter of making the application. And the application, they also will have with their set of panel of solicitors, and it's just a matter of time. But if you are buying from secondary market, then you need to do your own study. But the regulatory framework is still the same. Like the 1 million threshold, 2 million, and the state consent. So you still need to apply, assisted by your lawyer. And from my observation, most of them are approved. If they fall above the relevant threshold, most of them are approved.
Okay, so so I pass to the MC because the time for the panel discussion is up. But I think the MC is going to open up for the floor to ask questions. So maybe you guys can raise your hand, and the MC will pass the mic to you.
Anybody has any question? There was a question just now with the individual, yeah.
There's a question over there.
I actually want to ask Mr. Zuhaidi. Mr. Zuhaidi, I still a doubt if I were to pick up a property, be it at JB. How good is good to have a good lawyer? Because I got a friend who bought a property in KL also, but he was getting screwed up, that the broker them you need to top up this, top up that until he give up the property. So can you advise us, if I were to pick up a property there, be it in JB, which are the good legal advisor, legal lawyer?
Well, I don't have an office in JB. But feel free to give me a call, and I will link you to my team in JB. And we don't charge for over the phone conversation. Only if it's a result in a real transaction, then there's a method to calculate the cost and everything else. But there's so many law firms and everything. So I can't give a sweeping statement which one is good, which one is bad. But it's always the best practice. Once you have consulted someone, try to get a second or third consultation. You know, of course, try to get it free if you can. Yeah. Most of them, if you just ask, they will give answer like what I normally do. Huh?
And maybe I add on, other than looking for Ask Me, the other thing you can do is also word of mouth referral. If you have friends who have bought property in Malaysia and they have experienced a good service from a good lawyer, they will also be able to recommend them to you. There's a question from the in blue.
There seems to be a disconnect between what the federal government says and what the Johor state government says. Should it be that we should always follow what the federal government says? For example, also, I believe in Johor, foreigners should only buy in international zones. We don't know where those zones are.
Ask me,
Can you clarify?
Or Siva?
Yeah.
Land law in Malaysia is a federal law, but the management of land is up to the states. That's why the federal government makes the policy, but how it's being implemented in the state is up to the state. That's why when you, as a foreigner, you apply for permission, for approval to acquire lands in properties in Malaysia, you apply to the state, not to the federal. So the approval will be given by the state. So when you mention disconnect between what the federal is doing and the state is doing, it's because all newspapers, politics talk. But as I said, the regulation is very settled, especially the federal regulations on land law, acquisition, ownership of assets by foreign entities, and also at the state level. What they change normally in terms of levy, in terms of threshold, even zoning also, it's basically a generic zoning policy imposed by the relevant city council, which is in the state. So if you get properties from these developers who build on a schematic basis, obviously they have to comply with whatever the zoning approval that is authorized by the state government. Yeah. So trust your developer and read news with more cautions.
Siva, you want to comment on that?
And I'll just add on. He's right. State land is a state matter, so every state has a slightly different policy than what the federal government says. But they generally follow a guideline. The spirit of the thing is there. So some of the thresholds are different. But I think in the international zone, the one in Johor, this is the Nusa Jaya one, yes? Medini, where they have now come up with a blanket rule that
foreigners can own property below 1 million.
Anything,
yes,
yeah.
That's
so
what Medini.
Again, like I said, politics always trump economics, and I think that was, I don't know how that came about, but it did. And I think in that zone, you can literally buy anything you want. Everywhere else, the same rule applies. It changes a bit because Selangor Penang has a 2 million threshold, I think, instead of 1. Some parts of Selangor have 2 as well. So it's similar but not the same.
I have one question here.
Yep.
Yeah, this is just a follow-on question to that earlier discussion point. From what I understand, even before the GE14, in states like Selangor and Kelantan, which were the Pakatan Harapan states as well. Oh no, sorry, not Kelantan. Yeah, opposition states previously. Foreigners couldn't buy landed freehold residential. But now with the GE14 and the new government in place, do you potentially see other states actually coming up with that kind of similar regulation, maybe Johor or maybe some other states, in terms of freehold landed residential?
Foreigner can buy.
Actually, I don't think in Selangor, to the best of my knowledge, I don't think in Selangor a foreigner cannot buy a landed property. I don't
Foreigner
think so.
can buy.
Can. It's okay. They had some different zones where they said within these zones the 1 million threshold doesn't apply. It's got to go to 2 million, you know. But besides that, I think you can buy. Yeah. So there's no such ruling. Well,
Yep. So
I haven't heard of it. He hasn't. So I trust there isn't one. Yeah.
Yep. Okay. Any other questions? Yes.
Okay, one last one.
Hi. I just want to check with you all. In terms of Johor's pricing at the moment, right? It's going about 700 to about 1,000 ringgit per square feet. This is almost the same as what we can get at KL. KL is also going at about 800 to about up to 1,000, 1,200, 1,500. So do you think this is sustainable for Johor? Because my view, right, is KL is the main city and you have all your big companies there, right? So the Malaysians are much more skilled there. They're paid better there. Whereas the Malaysians who are traveling in and out of Singapore, right, are the I would say the lower skilled people. So in terms of the rental and all, right, I would still think KL is better. So do you think Johor's prices would readjust? Or is it because it's priced off the proximity to Singapore?
Let me answer that. You know, you're right. But who is to say what price is? You know, it's market driven, right? I could feel that this bottle of water should be no more than 1 ringgit. But if you guys were all prepared to pay 1 Sing dollar, so be it, that's the price of the water. So it's very market driven. It is very difficult, it's next to impossible to decide that KL should be more expensive than Johor or Penang should be more expensive than KL. It's very difficult to decide. But you're right. So that's why I said just now, a few minutes ago, that KL City and its environs are very underpriced compared to the other sectors of Malaysia. And perhaps when on the next upcycle, I think KL will find its footing and jump up.
Edith, you want to comment on that also?
Sorry, if I may just add, right, one more way to test, right, is to see the rental market. How strong is the rental market? If you're seeing property values going up, right, and the rental market being flat, that's a sign that sort of like a bubble is happening. So this is just my views. If I see Johor now, right, you see the rental market not doing that well, right? The rents are pretty flat or even going down. But the prices also are coming down, but still priced at a premium. Any views on that? Yeah.
Yeah, well, sadly, the investment market in Malaysia is not very yield driven. So they are not looking at rent. If everybody looked at rent, what is the yield coming in, 3/4 of the properties that were being offered for sale shouldn't have been sold. Because the rent coming in is going to be 0. So what is your yield? 0. You can be promised any yield you want, but if you don't have a tenant, your yield is 0. But 80%, 70-80% of prospective purchasers were not yield driven. They were not calculating yield. So there is really very little correlation between rental value and capital value for residential property in Malaysia. There is a very strong correlation for commercial properties, industrial properties, and all kinds of other asset classes. But in residential alone, it doesn't hold true. No. Because there is no correlation, the rental can come down to 0, the value still stays where it is. Values have come down. Yeah, I already showed charts just now to say that everything came down already and now it's on its way going up slowly. Yeah, everything has come down.
Maybe I also take another perspective because I travel to China very frequently. Johor reminds me of Shenzhen, which is next to Hong Kong, and KL reminds me of a combination of Beijing and Shanghai. One is the political capital and one is the commercial capital. So we noticed that the prices in Shenzhen is no less than Shanghai or Beijing. And we all know that Shenzhen last time was just a fishing village, which has no value, but it rise in value because of Hong Kong. So Johor rise is more because of its proximity to Singapore. It's actually a proxy to Singapore. So like what Siva say, Johor did benefited a lot from Singapore. There are many Singaporeans who buy property in Johor because for the kind of price, they probably can buy a small HDB, but over in Johor, they can own a landed property. But this kind of thing, you cannot quantify using rental because you cannot quantify enjoyment of a nice garden in front of you, you know, that kind of thing. And secondly, it also boils down to Siva's earlier point. It depends on the investor investment objective. Recall I asked him a question, landed or condominium. So if you are a yield-driven investor, then probably you might want to go for KL, like those Edith mentioned, city center, service apartment, people manage for you. You will be given very good yield, stable yield. But then there could be investors who are not going for yield-driven. They are going for capital gain, they are going for personal enjoyment. It takes them 1 hour to drive up to Johor, they don't have to take a flight. So that one is their own objective also. So it all depends on the individual investor.
On that note, we really have ran out of time. On behalf of PropertyGuru, I really would like to thank all three of our panelists and of course, Mr. Winston himself.